It's safe to say that Conor McGregor's physique has changed, and UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, along with many others, has recently questioned whether steroids or other banned substances in the professional fighting world may have played a part in his unusually jacked appearance. So what exactly did Sterling have to say? Also, how has McGregor responded to these claims? Let's find out. First up, the famous Conor McGregor has recently come under fire as some believe he could be taking illegal performance-enhancing drugs. But why do they think that? Let's take a look. Conor McGregor's recent images where the UFC megastar seems to be incredibly jacked have drawn quite a lot of criticism from fellow UFC fighter Aljamain Sterling. In July 2021, McGregor last fought in a lightweight match against Dustin Poirier, where he got demolished and also broke his leg. If you haven't watched this bout, you must immediately. Poirier knocked out the Notorious in the first round of the fight after suffering a horrific leg injury. Since that moment, McGregor hasn't engaged in any fights. However, he has put great effort into his recovery and ultimate return to the ring. According to the former UFC featherweight and lightweight champion, his comeback fight will happen sometime in 2023, most likely at welterweight. However, it's not his return that has the UFC community stirring. It's the Irishman's recent increase in muscle that has landed him in hot water because some competitors and fans have accused him of utilizing steroids. For example, Sterling commented on McGregor's physique on his podcast titled The Weekly Scraps. "The guy is jacked as ever. I'd like to know what he's on because his arms are ginormous." He continued explaining that he basically looks like a bodybuilder nowadays. Now, we must note that nothing has been proven or disproven at this point, but suspiciously, McGregor withdrew from the USADA testing pool a few months after his injury, and his naysayers frequently bring up the fact that he wasn't tested in 2022 at all. But if he wants to compete in 2023, McGregor must undergo 6 months of testing before engaging in another fight because he has yet to undergo a USADA test. Since the third quarter of 2021, the Irishman has denied any wrongdoing by asserting that he is the most tested fighter ever in combat sports, and USADA has stated that they are unlikely to allow McGregor any type of dispensation to the 6-month testing period. So I guess we all find out once and for all if he really is using steroids or is he just working hard in the gym. What do you think? Speaking of McGregor and his possible steroid use, he recently clapped back at none other than Joe Rogan. Here's what happened. In a now-deleted post, Conor McGregor attacked Joe Rogan once more for saying that the UFC commentator's urine would melt the cup in a drug test. The Notorious, aka McGregor, is presently not a participant in the USADA testing pool, where competitors are screened at random for the use of performance-enhancing substances with the likes of steroids. Instead of the usual 6 months back in the pool, McGregor claims he will need just 2 tests, starting in February, before he can resume fighting. Rogan, on the other hand, isn't so sure and stated that if the former 2-weight champion were to get tested by USADA right now after packing on almost 40 pounds since his last fight, his pee would melt the cup. This is clearly a funny thing to say, but Rogan was also being pretty serious. However, in retaliation to these comments, McGregor posted 2 images of Rogan, one at age 25 and the other at 52, in which the comic podcast host appears to be in fantastic shape, implying that he must be doing something illegal to maintain that. Now, this is all speculation at this point, but we wouldn't be surprised if his test did come back positive. We guess 2023 will be the year we find out. While we're on the topic, McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov rivalry used to consist of Khabib idolizing his counterpart. Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov's rivalry has elevated the UFC to new levels, to say the least. Before their disagreements were resolved, Nurmagomedov saw McGregor as his hero. The two fighters perfectly illustrate how idols can quickly develop into enemies. In fact, the Dagestani warrior was a true fanboy before becoming a UFC legend himself. Nevertheless, as the Dubliner advanced in weight class, the two were destined to clash and develop a captivating rivalry. Recently, ESPN posted some images illustrating the two former champs' transition from idols to adversaries, and of course, the fans immediately grabbed control of the comments section with ideas on what may have happened if the two had never developed a rivalry. Unquestionably, the UFC community was split in part, with McGregor supporting one side and Nurmagomedov supporting the other. A recent image of McGregor and Nurmagomedov meeting on ESPN MMA rekindled the viewers' memories. The tweet read, "With Conor McGregor after his incredible victory in UFC 178," and the image was from 2014. The image was followed by another, though, in which the two were standing face to face. Although the fights appeared to be resolved inside the octagon, the heat they generated has yet to subside. Fans on unquestionably took over the comment section and expressed their admiration for the boxers. Additionally, the supporters could not resist imagining what might have happened if the two had never developed a rivalry. Now, McGregor is far from the first person to be suspected or even caught taking performance-enhancing drugs, so we thought, why not take a look at some of the most infamous cases of UFC fighters taking steroids? There are constantly whispered rumors about fighters in the mixed martial arts community who are gaining a little extra strength from the end of a needle. These days, everyone from current champions to fighters in the undercard tests positive for prohibited substances. Therefore, something needs to change. First up, TJ Dillashaw. Former UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw was one of the most notorious athletes to test positive for performance-enhancing drugs in recent years. He tested positive for the illegal steroid EPO at the beginning of 2019 and was subsequently suspended by USADA and stripped of his UFC bantamweight title. It's interesting to note that prior to failing his drug test, Dillashaw has been accused of using performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, multiple times, most notably by his sworn enemy, Cody Garbrandt. Throughout their feud in 2017 and 2018, Dillashaw was always forthright and honest about his use of EPO, in contrast to other boxers who had tested positive for steroids and denied it. After being suspended, the former UFC champion acknowledged using EPO to aid in the difficult weight loss he subjected his body to in order to compete at the 125-pound flyweight limit against Henry Cejudo in January of 2019. Dillashaw claimed that he utilized the drug to counteract the early symptoms of anemia that started to appear during his weight loss, adding that he probably wouldn't have been able to survive the fight without it. Next up, Tim Sylvia. Tim Sylvia was a heavyweight who had never lost and carried the UFC title on his shoulder in 2003. Moreover, the Maniac tested positive for stanozolol following his first defense against Gan McGee. The champion acknowledged using the substance to enhance his body, but assumed that it would have left his system because he had stopped using it before the battle. The NSAC imposed a $10,000 fine and a 6-month suspension on Sylvia. To express his regret, Sylvia offered to forfeit his championship, which was a true display of class. There is no doubt that Tim's failed drug test harmed his career, despite the fact that he would go on to win the heavyweight championship back and defend it twice more. There aren't as many benefits to belonging to the infamous "I got stripped of my world title" club as you might think. Another fighter who ultimately got caught includes Kimo Leopoldo. One of the UFC's early stars, Kimo Leopoldo was recognized as much for his intimidating physique — he resembled the lead villain from a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie from the 1980s — as he was for his prowess in the cage. However, Kimo left the UFC in 1996 after suffering defeats to opponents like Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock. In 2003, he unexpectedly came back and defeated Tank Abbott, surprising many UFC fans. The fact that Leopoldo still possessed his frightening body at 36 was perhaps the most surprising. When Kimo later faced Ken Shamrock and tested positive for an illegal anabolic steroid after losing, few fans were surprised because they could smell a rat. Kimo was content to admit that he had used performance-enhancing drugs after the Nevada State Athletic Commission had suspended him. The Hawaiian claimed he used the steroid, stanozolol, in an effort to increase his strength for the fight, but had no idea he would actually be put to the test. Unfortunately, Kimo's experience with PEDs didn't end there. The Hawaiian passed a second drug test for the same substance before a scheduled fight in the WFA promotion in 2006 and was immediately dropped from the event despite being fined $5,000 and suspended for 6 months. Now, it is less common to see women doing this, but not the mighty Cyborg, who tested positive. You mean the massive girl who we all assumed was on steroids tested positive for the drug? Leave the city now. According to Cyborg's argument, she struggled to lose weight for the competition and turned to a nutritional pill to aid in the process. Yes, but there is one issue with that defense. She tested positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid that is never seen in nutritional supplements. Santos was also fined $2,500 and suspended from the CSAC for a year. Additionally, her victory over Hiroko Yamanaka was nullified and recorded as a no contest. The termination of the whole Strikeforce division was unquestionably brought on by Cyborg's loss of the women's featherweight title. This resulted in her being unemployed by the UFC once Strikeforce shut down, which is more than enough evidence to claim that she let one failed drug test wreck her entire impressive career. Last but not least, Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen, a former middleweight title contender for the UFC, is possibly the most notorious PED user in the organization's history. The American gangster failed 2 drug tests, one once in 2010 and once in 2014. Sonnen was more than willing to admit his mistake on both occasions, but he always staunchly refused to label himself a cheat. Following Sonnen's defeat to Anderson Silva in a thrilling UFC middleweight title match at UFC 117, abnormal testosterone to epitestosterone levels were first detected in 2010. He also freely acknowledged using synthetic testosterone, but he also asserted that he did so because he had a prescription for testosterone replacement treatment, TRT, but had neglected to tell the California State Athletic Commission about it. Well, unfortunately, guys, that is all the time we have for today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.